What if the universe is not merely capable of supporting life, but calibrated for it with a precision so severe that chance begins to look less like an explanation and more like an escape route? That is the question at the center of the teleological argument. Not a vague appeal to beauty, not a sentimental feeling under a night sky. A physics case built on constants, forces, ranges, and consequences. If the numbers governing the universe were even slightly different, there would be no stars, no planets, no chemistry, no observers, no argument, and no one left to pretend the question does not matter. Fine-tuning is the discovery that the basic physical constants of the universe fall within extraordinarily narrow life-permitting ranges. These are not decorative features added after the fact. They are the deep settings of physical reality: the gravitational constant, the electromagnetic force, the strong nuclear force, the cosmological constant, and over a dozen others. These constants govern how the universe behaves. Gravity determines how matter gathers. Electromagnetism governs charged particles. The strong nuclear force holds atomic nuclei together. The cosmological constant is tied to the energy density of empty space and the expansion of the universe itself. Fine-tuning does not mean the universe was made comfortable for us in every corner. It means the conditions necessary for stars, planets, chemistry, and life exist only within an extremely narrow range of possible values. That distinction matters. This is not a theological assumption smuggled into science. The fine-tuning problem arises from physics. Scientists looked at the constants in the equations and asked what would happen if those values were different. The answer was not mild inconvenience. The answer was cosmic collapse, runaway expansion, failed chemistry, or a universe with no life-permitting structure at all. The issue is not whether the universe is large. It is. The issue is not whether it contains danger, emptiness, and death. It does. The issue is whether the deep structure of the universe is balanced on values that permit life in the first place. And it is. So the question becomes simple, but not shallow. Why are the constants set this way? Start with the cosmological constant. This concerns the energy density of empty space. It affects whether the universe expands in a way that allows matter to gather into galaxies or becomes hostile to structure before structure can ever form. Physicist Robin Collins has calculated that if the cosmological constant alone were altered by 1 part in 10 to the power of 120, the universe would not permit the formation of galaxies and stars. If it were different in one direction, the universe would expand too rapidly for matter to form galaxies. If it were different in the other, the universe would collapse back on itself long before stars could appear. 1 part in 10 to the power of 120. That is not a small adjustment. That is not a lucky coin toss. That is a level of precision that should make every honest mind pause before waving it away. And this is only one constant. The gravitational constant has to allow matter to gather without making stable stars and planets impossible. The electromagnetic force has to allow atoms and chemistry. The strong nuclear force has to permit the nuclear stability required for the elements life depends on. These constants are not all the same dial. They are independent of each other. It is not enough for one constant to land in the correct range. They must all fall within their ranges simultaneously. The cumulative force of the evidence is the point. Now consider Fred Hoyle. Hoyle was an astrophysicist and a committed atheist for most of his career. That matters because his conclusion was not produced by Christian theology. It came from studying the carbon resonance levels that make carbon-based life possible. Carbon is essential to life as we know it. The conditions that allow carbon to form in stars depend on highly specific resonance levels. Hoyle saw the significance and said that a common-sense interpretation of the facts suggests that a superintellect has monkeyed with physics, chemistry, and biology, and that there are no blind forces worth speaking about in nature. That is not a preacher speaking from a pulpit. That is Fred Hoyle, an atheist scientist, looking at the data and acknowledging what the data suggested. He did not become a Christian, but he saw that the facts were not easily dismissed. Physics, chemistry, and biology bore marks of coordination. He used the word super-intellect because the evidence pressed in that direction. This is why fine-tuning is not an argument from ignorance. It is not saying, We do not know how this happened, therefore God. It is saying, we do know the conditions required for life, we do know the range is extraordinarily narrow, we do know the constants are independent, and we do know the result looks like calibration. The argument is not built on what science has failed to discover. It is built on what science has discovered. There are two major responses. The first is necessity. This says the constants had to be what they are. They could not have been otherwise. At first, that sounds clean. If the universe had to be this way, then there is nothing to explain. But the necessity argument fails because there is no known physical principle requiring these constants to take these exact values. It asserts necessity where the evidence does not establish it. You cannot solve fine-tuning by declaring the settings must be fixed unless you can show why. Without that, necessity is not an explanation. It is a label placed over the absence of one. The second response is the multiverse hypothesis. This is the most common secular alternative. If there are infinitely many universes, each with randomly varying constants, then it is not surprising that one universe would end up with the right values for life. We happen to be in that one because we could not observe any other. But the problem is serious. The multiverse is not a scientific theory in the standard sense. It makes no testable or falsifiable predictions. It gives us no observable access to this infinite ensemble of other universes. It is not an empirical discovery standing on equal footing with fine-tuning. It is a philosophical proposal designed to avoid the inference of design. The standard of explanation cannot change the moment design becomes uncomfortable. If a theory cannot be tested, cannot be falsified, and depends on an infinite number of unobservable universes, then it is not modest. It is extravagant. The multiverse asks us to believe in an immeasurable collection of unseen realities to avoid the conclusion that this visible reality bears the marks of intelligence. And it still does not remove the deepest question. Why is there a multiverse generating system at all? Why does it have the capacity to produce life-permitting universes? The multiverse does not escape design. It only moves the question back one step. The design inference is not childish. It is not anti-scientific. It is the natural conclusion when independent physical constants fall within narrow life-permitting ranges, when the cosmological constant must be precise to 1 part in 10 to the power of 120, when carbon points to deep coordination, and when even an atheist like Fred Hoyle could speak of a superintellect. The universe is not a random fog of meaningless events. Its foundations are mathematically structured.